Race fans, it's time to buckle in and listen to the fastest hour in racing radio. Your driver is a multi-time NASCAR winner and Hall of Famer Mark Martin. We cover racing, grassroots, history, we bench race, we talk life, and most importantly, we smash the loud pedal. It's time to turn some laps on the Mark Martin Podcast.
Well, I'm really excited today to have my old friend Ray Dillon, and we're going to have the opportunity to kind of discuss some things that we may not have ever discussed about our glory years together. And I want to start by kind of setting the stage, and I'll go through it real quickly because I want to get to the good stuff. But in 1976, I raced the local dirt tracks in Arkansas. And in 1977, I made the jump to pavement racing, late model asphalt racing. Got my start, got my feet under me pretty good, and by mid-season, was starting to venture off into the ASA series and picking up some of those races. And I wound up winning the ASA Rookie of the Year for 77. So I set my sights on 1978 to really build my name. I was going to go down to the New Smyrna, to the World Series of asphalt racing, try to win that championship, and also try to race for the ASA National Championship, which really I never expected to be able to win in 78, just getting my feet under me. But we went to New Smyrna. We won the series based on not lightning speed, but just consistency, but wound up winning the title. And then and then in the ASA series as well, we won that title, and it was a pretty big deal because I was just 19 years old, and back then that was kind of young and unheard of. So my plans for 1979 were, because the New Smyrna series was such a money loser, and since I'd already won that title and the ASA title, I wasn't going to race New Smyrna in 79. I didn't really need to spend the money to go down there and do that. So I was going to go down to Speed Weeks anyway, keep my nose into everything. And back then they had the Oval Track Trade Show, which is kind of like PRI show is today. But they'd have that Oval Track Trade Show and during Speed Weeks, and I was going to go and see what kind of deals I could, get put together for more manufacturers support and free parts kind of support. And so here's how it goes. I'm walking through the Oval Track Trade Show, and I see a little booth with coil springs set up there, and I see a man standing there, and I'm like, well, here we go. I'll go over here and see if I can get on a spring deal. And so I walk up and introduce myself, and it's Ray Dillon. We have a brief conversation about springs, and he says, yeah, and if you need a trailer, I'll give you a trailer too. And if you need a shop, you can use a shop. And if you need a place to stay, there's a house next door to the shop, and I'll rent that to you for $150 a month. The thought had never really crossed my mind of leaving Arkansas, but it was a pretty exciting offer. And I just want to know, Ray, what you were thinking when I walked up there.
Well, I had been racing myself for 6 or 7 years, and I was dead set on building a coil over shock short track stock car. I just had a lot of ideas, and I had built some stuff that I was campaigning locally, but I worked for myself. I had at that time, 3 or 4 employees, and we were building trailers and building a few race cars and roll cage kits for the local guys. What I was looking for was I couldn't run a business and campaign a race car. It's just physically couldn't do it and couldn't afford to do it. And I saw the opportunity to put a young kid in one of my race cars and go out and set the world on fire and expand the business by, racers are kind of monkey see, monkey do, and whatever wins on Sunday sells on Monday. And so I guess that's what I was thinking, Mark. I thought, here's the opportunity.
Well, that was that was really wild because I had just turned 20 years old, and of course, this was a really exciting opportunity for me. And if anybody wants to go back and listen to the podcasts, our podcast explaining 1977 and 1978, you'll understand more about why I wanted to make the move to Indiana. One of the reasons was I blew 3 motors up in the haulers in the tow truck going from Arkansas to Wisconsin and Indiana, racing every weekend. So getting up there centrally located was part of the equation, but there was a lot more to it than that. So I was really excited. So we made the deal. Ray and I made the deal standing there in a trade show. And I went home from Speed Weeks and started packing up my stuff. And in March, I moved up there and, got ready to go to work. There was a lot to all of that. It was a really exciting time. And we got moved into the house. I took 2 full-time employees. I think I brought, of course, Banjo Grimm with me, and I think David Lovendahl. And we moved into that house and got set up there. And one of the things that really strikes me, Ray, is I'm going to say one more time, and then I'm not going to say it anymore. But I was 20 years old, and you handed me the keys to your shop. And those keys, that shop, I could walk into the parts room. I could get parts. I could get bolts out of the bolt bin. I could use any of the equipment in the shop. And of course I did it at night because we're work day and night. And so, if I needed something at night, I could just unlock the shop and go in there and get what I needed. I mean, when I think back on that, once again, I think, Ray, what were you thinking? I was 20 years old and you didn't know me.
I knew you enough that I wasn't worried about you running off with anything because we had too much future together. And I guess when we put our deal together, it was like we didn't even write anything down. We didn't have no lawyers, no accountants, no contract. We just you can't do stuff like that today. We did it because we both had, I guess, a vision of what we wanted to do. And figured you needed a key to the place because I didn't want to stay there till 2:00 in the morning. I lived 5 miles away. I lived on the farm out in the country. And when, 6, 7 o'clock coming around at night, I wanted to go home. And I wanted you to be able, I didn't want to hold you up. So you having a key solved a whole bunch of problems.
Boy, it solved some problems for me too. It was a really, really incredible time. So we get started in 79. Of course, I'm still running my Howe car, and we get somewhere up into the summer, and you've got your plan in your back of your mind. Short story. Once again, the entire story's in the 1978 podcast, but you hit me up. Let's go up to Hartford, and you drive this car that you had built, which was a coilover rack and pinion car. It was a Camaro front snout car, not a tubular snout, but it was your vision, the beginnings of your vision, and you wanted me to race it up at Hartford. And I work in the shop till last minute. I probably ain't ate anything all day. Then I jump in the truck and we head off to Hartford. We run this car, and the whole thing runs pretty damn good. I'm pretty impressed with it. And I ain't ate all day. I ate about, a couple of pounds of M&Ms. And then we get in the tow truck to head home. and we're drinking beer. So that's when you hit me. Let's build us a car. That's when, it all started. And I said, well, okay, but I want to use the same geometry, same rear end, 3-link suspension. I want to use things that I know and understand. And then, you can bring in the tubular front snout, the straight right side frame rail, the coilover shocks, rack and pinion, and we'll make all those changes and make the car the car will be super light, super strong. We've got to get a surface plate to be able to do all that stuff. And we put it all together and come up with a plan. And we get home and I go into the house, and there again, I ain't eating anything all day except a few pounds of M&Ms. And that beer hits me. And all I know is I wind up the next morning about 5 o'clock in the morning, laying in the bathroom floor. So
Now, see, I didn't know about that part.
I don't tell that story much, but yeah. So I had to clean up the bathroom before the boys got up, and then go to work. And I didn't feel very good that day. But anyway, that's kind of the story on that, and the beginnings of the Dillon Mark II chassis. It was just that was magic for you and me both. It really, really built my confidence. And the thing I want to say, Ray, is you were a brilliant, brilliant person and such an asset to me, because you knew how to build things. Like I would have idea, but I wouldn't know how to turn some of those ideas into metal, and you could do that. And the two of us really complemented one another in that way. You also helped build my confidence beyond belief as far as being a chassis guy. And so it was a tremendous asset to me to be, by your side there for those 3 years.
Well, I appreciate that. And it, and we did all that stuff, Mark. We didn't have any engineers helping us. We didn't have computers. I had a drafting board, and I had taken mechanical drawing in high school. So I could lay a few things out on the old drafting board with a pencil and a T-square. But we did a lot of stuff together with strings, levels, protractors. Just lay stuff out on the cement floor and draw a bunch of lines till they intersect, and take a string and tie it on and pull that string and see where it goes. And that's how we figured out a lot of the geometry and figured out what ratio spring are we going to need if we know that we're running let's say a 1,200-pound conventional spring in the right front, and then we go to a coilover spring. Well, we figured out the relationship, how far was that spring going to move when the wheel moved an inch, and just did some basic math and said, well, we need a 400-pound instead of a 1,200-pound. And, pretty simple stuff. It's just farm boy stuff. Like you figure out where to put the hinge on the barn door so the cows won't get out. We were doing it with race cars.
Yeah, that was it was such a crazy time.
You are listening to the Mark Martin Podcast on the Accelerated Podcast Network.
Mark Martin Podcast, episode 49. Mark talking to Ray Dillon today. Ray brought Mark out to Indiana, and the two's efforts combined for the very first all-tube offset coilover race car. More from their conversation.
Hey, I want to tell another story. And, these stories that I tell, you may have perceived things differently than I perceive things. And I always say that when I tell stories, I'm not saying that they're absolute fact. They're the way I remember them. So one of the things that I remember was that I was going to need a trailer for 79. So when I got there and got moved into the house and got moved into the shop, it was time for that. Hey, what about that trailer? And you pointed to the steel rack and you said, there's your trailer right there. And, and so
Okay.
Banjo and I had to build that trailer. But it didn't cost us nothing, but a little bit of labor, but we built that trailer and we used that trailer, all of 79, 80, and we used it in 81 as well, even to do our first 5 cup races, were off of that Dillon trailer. So that was, that's kind of a cool story. I love the stories about the haulers and the trailers and all that, but that was one tidbit about it. So we get through 79, and in late 79, you guys are feverishly building fixtures and the jig and fixtures and everything for this first Dillon Mark II chassis, and we debut it. I think we maybe debut it at the Snowball Derby.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, that was the debut, and then we took it to New Smyrna. And if I remember correctly, about the second night or so, we got demolished, tore all to pieces. It may have been a few nights after that, but that kind of ended our Speed Weeks thing. And we were learning the new car. We get back, and get started racing up there in the north there in the spring, and we start picking up speed pretty quickly. But if I remember correctly, we ran like 38 races in 1980 with that, with our cars. We built 2 cars, one for Art Go and one for ASA, with a little bit different body configuration on the 2. And if I remember correctly, we ran like 38 races that year, and we had fast time 33 times.
I know it was frequent. That was pretty normal to have quick time, and a lot of times it was a new track record.
Yeah, most of the time it was a new track record. Yeah, and the thing about that too is one of the things that really held us back early in the season was I was still on Firestones, and Goodyears, were really coming on strong, and I didn't realize how much better the Goodyear tires were. So we get to Milwaukee in about May, and we unload the car, and I'm on Firestones. Well, funny story about that. Before we go to Milwaukee, back then tires cost $100 a piece, and I was on a Firestone tire deal. That's why I'm still running them, and I didn't have any money back then. I just got all kinds of manufacturers' parts, and we operated solely off of the purse money. And so I got ready to go up there, and my dad knew that, I needed to be buying tires, and I wasn't buying tires yet. And he gave me 8 $100 bills. That's 2 sets of tires. And I had those things in my pocket. I went to bed the night before the track opened in the hotel, and I woke up the next morning and I noticed that the door was open to my room. And I thought, oh my God. And I looked up on the dresser, and my wallet was still there. And I was like, oh my goodness. So I left there. I didn't think to look in the wallet, but left there and went to McDonald's and ordered breakfast. And when the breakfast came, I whipped out my wallet, and it was empty. So I go to the racetrack.
I didn't know nothing about that.
Oh yeah. So I go to the racetrack. I have to give them the breakfast back, and I go to the racetrack, and we practice, and we're not fast enough. When I sling lead, move, change springs, sling lead, move everything in that car, and practice is over now, and qualifying's up next, and I'm not fast enough. So put it on jack stands, and I put the chassis back exactly like we unloaded it when we left the shop, and I go over to Goodyear, carry 4 wheels over to Goodyear, and I have them mount up 4 stickers and roll them stickers over on and bolt them up on that car. and I ain't never made a lap on Goodyears before in my life. And, or, that's not true, but I haven't in years. And I roll out there to qualify, roll down the back stretch and go into 3, and she feels pretty good. So we lay down a track record and set on the pole for the Milwaukee race. First time rolling out on those Goodyears. So I go ahead and buy another set on credit for the race. So we've got our 2 sets. And we do win the race. From there in May, we really start picking up speed because now, I've jumped off the Goodyears or off the Firestones, and we just continue to build momentum throughout the years. We just demolish the competition to the point where I'd like for you to tell the listeners who some of the big name customers that you started getting after that.
Well, all of a sudden there was people calling or coming over to me at the racetrack, looking for a chassis, and Rusty was one of them. Dick Trickle, Kenny Schrader, Don Gregory, Bob Strait. I know there's a lot of people that I'm going to hurt their feelings by not remembering their name in this conversation, but we ended up, I had to add a couple employees at the shop and had to, some of the parts and pieces that were like a burnout, we were using enough of them that I was able to go to a fab shop in South Bend and have stuff that we were doing one at a time on a little magnetic tracer burning machine. I was able to buy them 50 at a time, and things just really, really took off.
Yeah. Plus, what about your Southern, all your Southern, like your Butch Lindleys and Neil Bonnets and. Yeah.
We got from running things other than all pro, than ASA, was doing the all pro stuff and some of that NASCAR American Challenge, and Butch won a lot of races in my cars, and Neil Bonnet become a dealer and sold a lot of cars to the Southern guys. And I know the following year when we were getting ready to go to Daytona for New Smyrna and the Oval Track Trade Show, we had a board, like a bulletin board, right outside of my office in the main part of the shop. And we had, if we had orders, we had them thumbtacked up to that bulletin board. And when we left to go to New Smyrna, there was 42 cars on order. Just unbelievable.
Wow. And David Pearson.
David come up to the shop and he was up at the shop, and the local newspaper, the South Bend Tribune, come down to the shop and did an article on him coming to the shop. And we, at that time, at lunchtime, would go downtown to this restaurant called Mr. T's, and we were down there a couple days later having lunch, and the guy that owned the place, Mr. T, he come over to me and he says, "Hey," he says, "was that David Pearson that was with you in here the other day?" And I says, "Yeah, as a matter of fact, it was." And he says, "Well, doggone it," he says, "next time you got somebody famous in here with you, let me know." And I said, "Well, Mr. T, I'd like you to meet Neil Bonnet."
and you sold, of course, Darrell Waltrip and Dale Earnhardt, the Mark II chassis as well, cars. And, anybody, when you force Dick Trickle to buy one of your cars, that's big. I mean, Dick had been racing that Bimco car for forever. And when we took it to, we just took it to him so bad in 1980 that everybody just threw their hands up and bought a car. And it
Well,
was,
part of that deal was people would come to you and ask you for some tips on what springs to run or how to set their car up or whatever. And I saw this several times, and it really impressed me. You told them, you said, well, now, if you had a Dillon car, I could help you. But the chassis that you got, I don't know much about it. And within a few days, there was an order on the board with their name on it.
and speaking about helping people, I got $100 cash in many of those cars you sold. When they would take them home and finish them, they'd bring them back to the shop, and I would do the setup on them. And they would pay me $100 cash, which was important. But I gave them, like Bob Strait was, and those guys were a great customer, had a great car. And that was the year, that I came up with the 3-spring setup for Winchester. And those guys brought their car and had me set it up before Winchester. I set it up on the 3 springs. And not only did we go down there and sit on the pole and shatter the track record, but Bob sat on the outside pole on 3 springs as well. So I would do that all the time. I mean, I set, in fact, Dale Earnhardt had me come to his shop and do the chassis setup for his car, I think in about 83 or 84, before he went to the Slinger Nationals. And he paid me $100 cash, and that was like gold to me. So I would do chassis setups all the time for those cars. And it was a golden time for you and me both. I was really happy. It was a real compliment to me to have so many people want to buy your cars and run your cars. And I was never threatened by any of those guys because I always felt like my car was better than theirs anyway. My cars were always lighter than any of the customers because I worked harder. We put more hours in. We cared more. We ground and sanded on those cars and polished and pushed and pulled on the bodies and made the cars lighter. My car always had more left side weight than any of the customer cars, solely because we put more work into them. So, that
was all a benefit of you having a key to the shop.
It absolutely
you worked, you thrashed, you worked, and you was there half the night. You must have got by on 3 or 4 hours of sleep for about 3 years there because the lights were always on at midnight. You weren't done yet. And the thing is, the chassis that you got, when it come off of the jig, in fact, there was a time or two. There was one time one of your cars got wrecked. I don't remember where it was. And we pulled a chassis out of it was for somebody else. I don't remember who it was, but we just gave you that chassis because it didn't matter to me or my guys who it was for. We just put out the best that we could, and everybody got the same thing. And the difference was when you got yours, you took it across the parking lot to the building that you used over there, and you rubbed on it. And most of the other guys just took it home and painted it and put wheels on it and went to the racetrack. It was the same piece. It's just theirs had not been ground and sanded and polished.
Yeah, that's for sure. So we have so much success, and we're entering into the fall part, and this is going to be a little bit of an interesting thing because you and I have never discussed really what took place the fall of 1980 and through 1981 and our venture into NASCAR, and then me packing up and moving out of there in November of 81. So we've really conquered ASA and the short track thing by late 1980. And I decide that I want to venture into NASCAR. And I want to use the same kind of thing. I want to use the geometry that I know how to use. So we make a plan. I make a plan for a Busch Series car or Xfinity Series car to do 5 super speedway races with, to get some super speedway experience, and a cup car that will be solely for a short track and racing. And I'm going to try to do really good, or maybe even steal a win coming right out of the gate. So we use, you build the front snouts for both cars, and we find somebody down south to put the cage and the rest of the frame together and hang the bodies so that they would be legal for NASCAR, because all that stuff is kind of green to us. My deal is still, I don't have any real money. I operate off the winnings. So my deal with you for 1980 was you build the car and the parts, and I take it and race it. I put the motor in it, transmission, and I take it and I race it, and I give it back to you in one piece, just like I got it from you in one piece. And so we had 2 cars like that, and that way I didn't have to invest any money into the vehicles themselves, and I could put my money toward going faster. And so that was the deal. So I made the deal with you to furnish the Busch car, and I found a guy named Bud Reeder from Denver, Colorado, that would pay for the assembling of the cup car. And so these are the things I remember you being involved in it. And so that was a big expense for you to be in. I'm not even sure why for sure you were interested in helping with that. But my plan for 81 was to do 1 ARCA race with that car, 5 Busch races, 5 cup races, and then all the rest of the time I was running short track races, ASA and ARTGO, and still kicking butt and winning races. So I had a real full schedule. And there, I want to let you talk a little bit about what you were thinking and what we did. I will say this: the second race out of the gate with that car that you furnished me got totaled. And so let's hear what your thoughts on all that were.
Well, it was you that was really set on going big time racing. I was content being, I guess, a big fish in a small pond business wise. We had like 17 employees by then, and we're just cranking out trailers and short track race cars and selling springs and selling component parts, and life was good. And you wanted to do that NASCAR stuff, and well, what the heck, it's a natural step, and so I thought, well, yeah, that's a feasible deal, and if I'm going to get the car back, it'll be famous when I get it back, and so I can sell it for a bunch of money, and I can buy myself a new bass boat or something. You can always follow the money if you want the answer to why something happened, but and besides that, it was a challenge, shall we say, to try to figure that out, because that you couldn't use rack and pinion or coil over shocks, and so that's when we really had to go to work with the strings and the protractors to try to figure some stuff out, because you and I both had a pretty good idea what we wanted those front wheels to do when you turned the steering wheel and when you went in the corner and the car rolled over, and we couldn't use the rack and pinion steering that we were accustomed to. We couldn't use the coil over shocks, so we had to figure out how to do it with conventional steering. And then there was also at that time a lot of the cars on the NASCAR circuit were a rear steer. They were a Ford strut suspension, we were geared for front steer. And so we had to go through the pitman arm, idler arm, drag link. Where do you put stuff at to get it to do this and do that? And it was, I could see it's going to be fun to figure all this stuff out. So I guess that's why I decided to get involved.
And it was going to all work out as planned, except the second race was Rockingham, and we go down there and sit on the pole. But in the race, the right front tire blows out, and it demolishes the car, and it's a total loss. And so that is a big setback for you and me both.
Yeah, but if you're involved in racing, that you're gonna lose some equipment sooner or later. And I remember when that happened, and we were extremely devastated. But it's just a racing thing. I didn't like, who we going to blame? You don't sue somebody. You just you just build another car, lick your wounds, and go on.
And it was in the race season, so we weren't going to be able to build another car. And I had my plan. I was going to stick to my plan. So I managed to buy a car from Rick Wilson to be able to run the other three Busch races that I had scheduled, and the ARCA race at Talladega. And we had a lot of success with that. But that brings me to the Cup car, and we get that Cup car all finished off. I take it to South Bend to test, South Bend Speedway, to test a couple times. And it sure seems to me like the thing falls off the tires pretty bad. But who knows? I didn't know much about a 3,700-pound car. I'd never been in the pits of a Cup race before, garage or anywhere else. Never been around it, so I didn't know. We go to North Wilkesboro with it the first time out of the gate, and I think we qualified like 6th. And then we take it to Nashville. I think I qualified about 5th or something, but we blew the motor up on the first lap. But it didn't matter. I knew that we were in trouble as far as the race went. So I knew we needed to make some changes on the car. So called up our buddy Randy Sweet and talked to him about, let's cut this, front end geometry up and make some changes to it. We made those changes, and we went down to Nashville the next race and set her on the pole. And a long story short, that car hauled butt. We went to Richmond and set on the pole and finished 7th. And then we took it to Martinsville and led the race for 40 laps or so and ran 3rd. And that is with an open Dillon trailer, and an ASA pit crew. Nobody, no NASCAR, nothing. Nobody from NASCAR even giving us any advice. We were just doing our own little thing.
What I remember about that second trip to Nashville and sitting on the pole, I was with you at that race. A lot of them other races, especially the Busch stuff, I didn't go on that. That was too far away, and I had ASA cars to build. But I went with you to Nashville when you sat on the pole, and what I remember about that was Ned Jarrett come over, and he said, "Hey," he says, "I need you when I forgot what the heck was going on." He says, "I need you to come over to the start-finish line in about 10 minutes. He says, "I'm going to present the Pole Award, which is a case of Busch beer." And he says, I need you to come over and accept that, because you're the only one on the crew that's over 21.
Yeah, a bunch of kids.
Yeah, a bunch of kids. And then I overheard some comments after I got the case of beer, was walking out with it. I overheard some comments among some of the important dignitaries that were there, and it was something to the effect of, "I don't know how them plow jockeys got that done." We definitely weren't Southerners.
No, we weren't. And there's a lot of good info on the 1981 podcast. Telling about technical inspection for that car and a lot of other things, and a lot of technical data about that car and how much lead was in it and all that stuff. So people can go back and listen to those, and they're very interesting.
From travel to NASCAR to Gucci Mane, we cover it all on the Mark Martin Podcast.
So we had huge, huge success together to this point. It's been absolutely like a straight shot to the moon. And for you and I both, and our careers and what we were doing. And so my plan at this point in time now is to go full-time cup racing in 1982. By this time I've got 3 full-time employees, and I feel a lot of loyalty to those guys and to you and to Ron Neal at Prototype Racing Engines, because without Ron Neal, I did all those races. I did 1 ARCA race, 5 Busch races, 5 Cup races, a bunch of ARTGO, ASA, and Southern races like All Pro, all different engines, different cubic inch engines, different kind of stuff. And I never got 1 bill for engines for the whole season. And if it weren't for him, that program wouldn't have worked either. Just like if it weren't for you, that program wouldn't have happened, period. So, I've got a lot of loyalty. And so I'm working in the shop, and the phone rings. It's one of them slimline phones that hangs on the pole barn pole back there at the back of the car. And I remember just like it was yesterday, I answered the phone, said hello, and it's Mark. This is Waddell Wilson. I'd like to know if you'd be interested in driving the 28 car next year. And I never even checked up. I took a breath and I said, no, Waddell, I think I'd rather do my own deal. Do you know how profound that? I mean, at the time I didn't think about it, but that was profound. I mean, there was a chance I could have been in the 28 car for the Daytona 500 in 1982, the fastest freaking car ever at Daytona and Talladega. I mean, it's just the craziest thing. But my first thought was, dude, I've got 3 full-time employees. I got Ray Dillon. I got Ron Neal. I got these people that have helped me get here. And I have a loyalty to them. I can't do that. And that was my feeling. After I made the move, I really thought back on it, and I felt like that, there was some bitterness on your side about my, leaving and going NASCAR racing. And I'd like to know, what your feelings were on it and where that all went.
Well, I guess keep in mind that was 42 or 43 years ago, Yeah. And if there was any bitterness on my part, I should not have shown it, because it was a natural thing. I mean, that was when we met at the trade show in Daytona. I knew that was your direction, and I was fortunate to go along for the ride in the meantime. And when it was time for me to get off the ride and for you to go on, that's the way it needed to be. And like I say, we never had any contracts or agreements. I would say that anything I might have displayed was disappointment. I was disappointed that you were going.
Yeah, it was a tough thing, Ray. It was a really tough deal, and I get that. and as the record shows, I went down there and did that thing, and got knocked completely to my knees, losing everything, having to have an auction and selling everything that I own to pay off all my debt. To kind of round out this story, I wind back up. Of course, I had to re-establish my career, so I come back up north, and in 1985, I'm back at Ray Dillon's picking up a Mark II chassis, and we're back together again, and we actually win a bunch of races and things in 1985. And by the way, in 1986, we win another ASA championship together. So there was a rough time there from the end of 81 to to somewhere maybe in 84, and then things turn out for the best again. So that's kind of a part of the history.
And we did that with a Ford.
Yeah.
You talk about some adapting.
Hey,
never in my life thought I'd be working on a Ford.
Well, I knew that I could get a little bit of support from Ford in 1984 after I went back to short track racing because of my contacts that I'd made from NASCAR. And so I knew I could get some help. So I didn't know nothing either. So I called up Ron Neal because, he's going to do the engines. And I'm like, hey, what do you think about a Ford? He says, well, it's only iron. So once he started, it's like, ain't no problem. I don't build them, but I'll start building them. It's just iron. I can do it. So yeah. So we do the Ford thing, which was fairly well unheard of in the circles that we ran.
The Mark Martin Podcast is a production of the Accelerated Podcast Network.
I want you to tell the story about your endeavor with the Green Weenie, because that's a very historical car, and you whipped my ass with that car at the Minnesota State Fair when I thought I had the race won. So talk about that.
Well, that all started actually when your car got demolished at New Smyrna. We were scheduled to, when speed weeks were over, we were scheduled to go over to Smokey Unick's garage and put a Buick V6 in that car to do some testing. You remember that?
No, that's so cool that you tell it. No, I don't remember that.
Okay, well, what we ended up doing is we called Big Ron that worked for me at the shop, and we had your ASA car was pretty well complete back at the shop. Big Ron loaded that up on a trailer and brought it to New Smyrna, and we went over to Smokey's garage, put a Buick V6 in that car, and then on Monday or Tuesday after speed weeks were over, went back to New Smyrna, and I don't know, you run like 100 laps or whatever with that V6 engine. Is that coming back to you?
Yeah, that's a vague memory now that you mention it. I had forgotten all about that. Yeah.
That's how the V6 deal got started. And because ASA was thinking about maybe starting to run V6s in the near future. So anyhow, when the way the Green Weenie come about was Billy Howell from Chevrolet called me up one day, wanted to know if I would be interested in building a Chevrolet Cavalier and putting a V6 motor in it to run a few selected ASA races. So that's how we built that car. And originally it was, there was all kinds of deals going on in that. Pancho Carter drove it once. I think the first driver for it was Waltrip. Because ASA would have, for a particular race that they needed a little help selling tickets, they'd make a deal to bring a NASCAR hero in to race, and most of those guys didn't have a car that was competitive in ASA. So I had a, shall we call it, a rent-a-racer program. And Waltrip drove it, Pancho Carter drove it. I can't remember who all else. And Butch Lindley was interested in it. And we were going to the Minnesota State Fair. Neil Larson, I think, was the promoter's name up there. Him and Rex Robbins come up with this deal of let's put Butch Lindley in that car, because they raced 2 weekends up there, and then there was a race like on Wednesday or Thursday night at La Crosse, Wisconsin. And
Right.
so they cut me a deal and bring that car up there, and Butch will drive it, and you and Butch split the money, and we'll get you a motel room, and we'll get you some Goodyear tires, and we'll get you some Union fuel, and Amsoil will give you bunches of grease and oil. And so, like I say, follow the money. I always go for that stuff. And so that's how we ended up at the Minnesota State Fair. And to run that V6 motor, we got a 450-pound weight brake. And at the Minnesota State Fair, they only run that track once a year at that time. And so the track would just eat tires. There was no rubber in it.
Right.
And that little V6, man, it would being 450 pounds light, and Butch was a pretty smooth driver, And,
he was incredible. Yeah, he was.
Yeah. And he would, it wasn't fast. Like, we didn't qualify good. But whatever qualifying speed was, it'd run that same speed all day long on the same set of tires. And guys like you with the more horsepower with the V8 and wanting to get going, about 10 laps, man, your tires were, it wasn't like they were shredded or the rubber was gone. It was just cooked. They just quit. Mm-hmm. And here'd come Butch. And
yeah.
I remember, oh, golly, I can't remember the guy's name now. They were pitted next to us. He called in on his radio to his guy and said, "How many of them green son of a bitches are out here?" I said, "Just one." And he says, "That can't be. I just got past the third time." So we ended up winning the 300 by 3 laps over the second place car. And it was just really cool.
Yeah, I guarantee it was cool. Yeah, it was really, really, really a spanking for sure. I also remember we were experimenting with a experimental rear suspension. We had that A-frame thing with the 5th coil spring and all that on the rear of it, and we had it working really good. We were second in class, I felt like.
Well, you broke a motor, motor or transmission, something broke and put you out of the race.
Yeah. It put us out of the race, but we were still getting our asses whipped by you. But we were second in class for sure.
There you go. Yeah. Well, what was another angle to that is I didn't have any pit stop equipment, and I was using your equipment and your crew. And the deal was, you would come in and make a pit stop, and then when you were back out on the track, then Butch would come in and we'd put his tires on. After whatever it was broke, it was like, probably wasn't. It was less than halfway into the race, or somewhere around midpoint. Anyhow, when your car was out, your guys start putting all the pit equipment away. Oh, wait a minute, guys, that ain't the deal. They were not happy.
Yeah. Golly.
But anyhow, we got it all worked out, and they changed Butch's tires one more time, and then we were all friends again.
Well, I tell you what, Ray, it's the time that we spent doing that is absolutely golden. Most pivotal point in my career were the 3 years that I spent in North Liberty. and you were a huge part of me going from a kid in Arkansas that knew a little bit about racing to, being on top of the sport. And those 3 years were incredible to me and mean the world to me. And all I can say is that I look back on those days as some of the most proud times of my life. And all I can say is I love you, brother.
Well, thank you very much. And I've told lots of people that if Mark and I had never gotten together, I'm sure Mark would have ended up being a famous Winston Cup driver, but I would have not ended up being a famous race car builder.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I never worked with anybody in my entire career that had a more that could figure out how to do it any more than you, Ray. And I worked with a lot of engineers with a lot of engineering background, and some of the greatest people in motorsports history. But and you were what those guys said at Nashville when they said, I don't know how them farmers did that. That's about right. A lot of your engineering was farmer engineering, but it was a way to accomplishment. You knew how to accomplish the things that we needed to make, and the mechanical way to make those things work. That was just so key in my development from 79 to 1982. And I just I want everybody to know, everybody that listens, and I want you to know how important you were in my development.
Well, my dad always told me the definition of horse sense is stable thinking.
Yep, that's good stuff, buddy. Good stuff. Man, this has been so much fun. I think this is just gold, and I appreciate you taking the time to share with us.
All right. I thank you for thinking of me. Appreciate it.